Hello, everyone. Welcome to my session, Developing Writing Skills for the Computer-Based Test. You're just logging into the session. Just out of curiosity, if you could type in the chat box where you're from, just to see how far we can reach here today. So I'm checking, so Bosnia, Poland, Estonia, Czech Republic, Lithuania, hello, Croatia, right. So hopefully we'll manage before your match today, Croatia. All the best for your match with Japan. Latvia, Macedonia, Georgia, right, and Ukraine. Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining the session. My name is Kamil Petrik. And as you can see, we're going to talk a little bit about writing skills for the computer-based test. The session will be 45-50 minutes, more or less. So just as I said, Croatia, don't worry, you will manage to watch a very important match today for you in the World Cup. And we're going to have a look and concentrate specifically on computer-based tests, and we're going to focus on the tasks in which the test takers have to show the writing skills today. If any, there is this chat box I can see that you're now using, saying hello from different parts of the world, and there's also a Q&A box where please, if you have any questions throughout the session, please type them into the Q&A box and I'll be able to address your questions at the end of the session today. The certificates from the session will be delivered to your email boxes, so if you have registered for the session, you have shared your email address, you will receive the certificate after the session. So, writing skills, let's move on. And just before we discuss specific tasks in which writing is tested, I just wanted to have a look at some general considerations when it comes to writing in a computer-based test, right? Because writing in a computer-based test is quite different in many aspects than writing in a classic paper-based test. So what are the most important points we have to bear in mind when discussing computer-based tests? Writing here, as you will see, tests integrated skills. So most writing tasks are combined together with some other skills like reading, listening. So as a matter of fact, writing is tested as a combination of skills. Writing here in computer-based tests is strictly timed. So it's a little bit different than in paper-based tests, where the test taker decides how much time they want to devote to writing tasks. Here, the time is strictly limited, right? So there's some kind of time window when they can write, and they cannot extend it because the writing box simply disappears from the screen. So writing is strictly timed in computer-based test. Well, obviously, the keyboard is used here, both for writing, also for taking notes, if necessary. So as a matter of fact, there's this kind of extra skill that is required, I would say, for writing in computer-based tests, which means typing. I would say that this is the area where the test takers or students can draw upon the skills that they acquired during the online classes during the pandemic, where they had to type a lot, and this is what they have to do here. They use keyboards, but they don't use any spell checkers. So this is another thing that test takers are typically used to when typing something. They're used to spell checkers automatically and correcting their spellings. Obviously nothing like that happens here. So this is another element that we have to bear in mind, and we have to share with our students that in this respect, it's a little bit different than writing or typing in real life. And there's also last thing, but maybe not the least, they have this automatic word count all the time in the screen, so they can easily control their word count. Unlike in paper-based tests where they have to use some techniques to control the word count, here it's done automatically. So these are some general considerations about writing in computer-based tests. Now I'd like to have a look at the tasks that actually test writing in the computer-based test Pearson English International Certificate, because that's the exam that we are discussing here. This exam, Pearson English International Certificate, is divided into two parts. There is this first part, listening and speaking, as you can see here. So there is no writing, seemingly, but there is a task that is called dictation, which tests listening and writing. So there is this writing element there. We're going to have, and this is why we're going to have a look at this task in a moment. So this is task one that we're going to discuss in a second. And then 3 tasks from part 2 of the exam, which is called reading and writing. And there we have read and write or recall task, which you have already discussed. I mean, you did last week with Bartek Janiak, where you discussed reading. Here we'll focus a little bit more on this writing aspects for this activity. And then, well, quite obviously, we have 2 short writing tasks in this part, which is the short writing task for the lowest levels, A1, A2, the Scribe Image, this is called, and we have a short writing task for higher levels, B1 to C1 to C2, and this is a write essay task. So 4 tasks in which writing is tested: dictation, read and write, short writing task low levels, and short writing task higher levels. And this is what we're going to have a look at in a moment. So let's start with dictation, a little bit about it. Well, dictation is somehow self-defined. We all know what dictation means. So this is by definition listening and writing. So here, this is what the test takers will see in the screen. They listen to a sentence or a short text, and short text which means a few clauses together, and write what they have heard. They listen to this only once. So let's have a look at what it, well, sounds like, I should say, not looks like. So the lowest, lower level, A2, it will be just a few words, as a matter of fact, and spoken very slowly. Listen to this.
She is going to plan our trip.
So that's level A2. And well, level C1, listen to that. It's a little bit different, obviously, longer and faster.
Our manager was uncharacteristically quiet during the meeting.
So that's individual sentences spoken only once, and the task is to transcribe the what is being said. Scoring, how it is scored. Basically, it's a partial credit score. Partial credit score means that this is not just 0 or 1, correct or incorrect, but there are some shades in between. So the score is based on how much has been understood from the sentence and how many words have been spelled correctly. So 2 skills are partial credited, as if to say, ability to understand sentence structure, word order, and connectors, and ability to write accurately. And this is the second one that we are mostly interested here. So just a little bit about some strategies and some tasks or activities that will help our students write accurately. So let's start with some strategies for the dictation. Obviously, this is a skill tested in combination, so we cannot avoid this listening aspect here. So the very important strategy is to focus especially on key or content words while listening. And then while transcribing, a good strategy would be to use for the test takers, would be to use abbreviations or some symbols, even better, to make writing faster and, well, more efficient. A good strategy as far as writing is concerned, and writing for the dictation, is ignoring spelling while listening. So that's something that they should be taught. Don't worry about spelling, right? Write down the word as you wish, right? You can even write it down using your native language spelling convention if you want, because the most important thing is to get down, to take down as many words as possible. There will be time to correct everything later on, right? So while listening, ignore spelling, use abbreviations, and checking spelling takes place afterwards, right? You have time after each, before you click next on the screen, you have time to check the spelling, check the sentence for any possible grammar mistakes or vocabulary mistakes. So these are the strategies for the dictation. And now a little bit about some activities for students to work towards these strategies with your test takers, with your students. So I mentioned using abbreviations and symbols. So it would be good when you are preparing students for this computer-based test. And not only that, because paper-based test also has a dictation in it. I'm talking Pearson English International Certificate. So this is some kind of skill that will be useful for both versions of the test. So develop with your students, a uniform system of abbreviations and symbols. Well, the most obvious ones would be, I know, instead of and plus, instead of without is W and O, you are, well, letters U and R, somebody S and B. So there are a lot of symbols that you can, or abbreviations that you can easily introduce and work on them and practice with the students, help them develop but it's important that the system is consistent, right? Because if it's not consistent, it will not work. So that has to be consistent. So and should always be a plus, for example. And it would be good to run activities practicing that from time to time. For example, you can dictate short sentences that they will transcribe with symbols and abbreviations. Well, you are somebody without an umbrella and a coat, right? Not a very sensible sentence, but the sense doesn't matter, right? We are practicing transcription into the abbreviations and symbols, and this could look like that. So you can do the same with some recorded sentences from your course books or as a pair work. So work on this, plan some activities in which you will help them develop this system of abbreviations and symbols. Another activity that will help them focus on keywords and transcribing keywords while listening is so-called dictogloss. I would suggest that's kind of a game. This could be used as a competition as well. For this dictogloss, you have to select a short, dense text from the audio script. So you take an audio script, for example, I know this is Speak Out Upper Intermediate. You go through the audio script and you look for a short, dense text. So it's better if it's not a conversation. So we exclude conversations. We're looking for some, as I said, short, dense text. Like here, you can see this is Unit 6, Recording 4. Why audio scripts? Because if you look for this text in the audio scripts, that means that you have a recording of that text. You don't have to read it out. You have a recording, which makes your life easier, simply speaking, well, helps your students being exposed to different native speakers or that they can listen to on the recording. So once you have selected the recording, you can play the text at a normal speed. And the task is that the test takers, they have to just jot down the keywords and phrases. So this is a dictation, but there are no pauses. They just have to jot down what they hear. Obviously, they won't be able to kind of reproduce every single word in a text like that of, I know, 60 words, for example. So the text will look like that on the right in the slide, with many gaps inside. You play the text only once, and you play it at normal speed. And the idea is that when you finish playing that, they get together in teams, pairs or groups of 3, some teams, and together they recreate, they pool their words and they reconstruct their version of the text. So they use some grammar knowledge, they exchange the words because some of them have heard words that the others haven't, for example. So they pull together and they recreate a text. And the idea is to play it as a competition, right? So the team that will have the most exact version of the text after the activity are the winners and can win a bar of chocolate from you, for example. So that's a good activity, competitive activity in which you practice focusing and transcribing the key words, and you ignore some, for example, grammar short words that can be recreated later on based on some grammar knowledge, for example. Another activity that I would strongly recommend looking at and using in your classroom practice are any activities which focus on sounds and spelling, the correlation between sounds and spelling. So with many books, Pearson course books, you can find especially pronunciation sheets or pronunciation sections of the course book. You can find a lot of very good activities. These are typically tiny individual activities somewhere in between some other activities. Pronunciation, where sounds together and with spelling are practiced. And for example, Roadmap has great pronunciation sheets where you have specifically sounds and spelling practice. So these are activities in which they practice the correlation, the relation between what they hear and how it is graphically represented. So these are very good activities for practicing getting ready for the dictation. Also, another important element or another important strategy that we discussed was checking the spelling afterwards. So it's also some kind of strategy that we have to think of when getting them ready for the dictation, like being able to proofread, simply speaking. So a good idea to prepare texts for proofreading would be when you read something, for example, we have a reading practice activity or reading comprehension activity like this one from Gold Experience B2, Unit 4. There's reading based on individual paragraphs. There's activity in which paragraphs must be matched to some points. It's a kind of a classic activity. After you have done that, why not use one of the paragraphs, for example, and take it and rewrite it? You can use some online OCR tools for that to make it faster. You can simply type it yourself, just one paragraph, and you change on purpose. You change some parts of it, just as I did, for example. So on purpose, you make it where you type it with some spelling mistakes and you give it for them to proofread. You can run it as a competition, for example, the group competition. The group that is the fastest to identify all the mistakes will be the winners. You can also type or Google incorrect sentences for students to correct. You will find a lot of websites where there will be, well, purposefully changed sentences for proofreading, for correction. And each time you perform this kind of activity, make sure that you analyze and explain the contextual grammar and word formation clues, so that to show them, to help them identify this kind of mistakes on their own. So that's it about dictation. And now task 2, in which writing is tested as a skill. This is read and then write. This then is very important because, as you remember maybe from last week's session, the activity, in this activity, they read to a short story or short piece of factual text, and the text, after 30 seconds, the text disappears and they have to reconstruct the text. So last week you talked a lot about speed reading, right? Concentrating on reading the text. Here we'll focus a little bit on this aspect of writing or rewriting or recalling the text in writing. So what is actually tested and what is scored here, on what is the score based? So the traits that are scored in this task is grammar, to what context, to what extent this is correct, and to what extent this is broad range of grammar that is used by the test taker. And there are some formal requirements also scored here. So is that a summary of this text and of this original text or not? And then content. Are there key points included in the passage, in the written passage? And are there maybe any misrepresentations, right? So are there additional points added or not, right? This is what is tested in the content. And obviously vocabulary. Is that vocabulary relevant to the passage, and does the vocabulary use and does the text written use appropriate synonyms from the original story? So what about the strategies for read and then write activity or task in the computer-based test? Well, you talked a little bit about it last time, that it's important to focus on the gist of the story, on the narrative structure. So to grasp the idea of the whole story, what's the beginning, what's the middle, what's the end of the story in the original text. It's very important to grasp that before they start writing their own text. That is, as a matter of fact, a summary of this given story. They have to remember, and you talked about it, that there is no on-screen notepad, so there can be no notes taken while reading the text. It's reading only. And then when it comes to writing down the summary of this original story, of this original text, it's important to remember to retell the story in your own words, I mean, test takers' words. And it's important to maintain the key points from the original story. And obviously, after that, after they have written this the summary, it's important that they check the grammar, spelling, all the language in the text before they submit the response. So how can we work to develop these kinds of these strategies in our students? For read and then write, a great source of material for work is 50-word stories. I don't know if I suppose that some of you know the idea of 50-word stories. There are some competitions, there are some clubs, there are websites devoted to 50-word stories. 50-word stories is an idea of writing a story that will have exactly 50 words. Maybe you have come across that in some course books. These are used, or you can find a lot of websites where you can find 50-word stories. Some websites are paid, but there are a lot of also free of charge websites where you can actually find some interesting stories. Because why is it important why am I talking about these 50-word stories? Because these 50-word stories are simply interesting, right? So you have a material, you have a short text, you have a short narrative, at the same time very interesting with sometimes surprising end. So Google 50-word stories and you find a lot of material for practice. And when you do that, sometimes you will have to simplify the stories for lower levels especially, and work with them. Have students, for example, as simple as that, give them the stories for 30 seconds or display the story. If you have a screen in your classroom, display the story, have your students read it for 30 seconds, and then, well, turn it off. or take away the stories from them and together discuss the narrative structure, overall message, the main points. So this is the moment that they have to go through in the computer-based test. They have to read out, they have to read the story, and they have to create the image, as if to say, of the story in their minds. So what's the main idea? What's the narrative structure? What's the overall message? These are the questions that they will ask themselves in the test. So these 50-word stories are great material to work with them and help them practice answering these questions. You can also take stories from your coursework. There are you can find a lot of short stories in your coursework. Typically, if it's you will not find them typically not in a reading comprehension tasks, because they are typically longer. But if you go to, for example, some grammar, discussing especially some past forms, very often, just as you can see, Speak Out Intermediate here, you can find some short stories. These are not intended to be for reading comprehension, but you can use these short stories to do the same. Ask the students to read the story. After 30 seconds, they close the books and you discuss the overall message, the main point, the narrative structure, all those elements that they will need in the test. You can also find short stories as introductions to some listening or some watching videos, just as this blind painter from Speak Out Unit 1. So you can find a lot of short stories for this kind of activity in coursework as well. When students write after having read the text, an important skill here is paraphrasing. They will have to paraphrase the original text, and any activity in which they practice paraphrasing will benefit your test takers. So why not play a paraphrase race, so to make things competitive? And well, the simplest possible activity to work with paraphrase, that could be played at the beginning of the class, or even better at the end when the concentration level goes down and you need some kind of activity to boost concentration in your students. So you take these short stories that you worked with and you, for example, paraphrase each sentence of the story. That will be like 4 or 5 sentences if the story is really short, like 50 words. And this could be played as a competition. So each team, for example, they play in teams. So each team has to paraphrase every single sentence of a story. But there are 2 rules. That's very important to introduce the 2 rules. That this paraphrase must, rule number 1, be accurate. So exactly the same tenses and meaning, no change of tenses and meaning. For example, if you have a sentence, this blouse is too big for her, and you paraphrase it into she was too big for the blouse, it's wrong because it's not accurate. It's not the same tense. So rule number 1, each paraphrase must be accurate. Rule number 2, there must be more than 1 change in a sentence. So if you make this blouse is too big for her and this shirt is too big for her, for example, this is just 1 synonym, let's say blouse and shirt, so just 1 change. It's against the rules. There must be at least 2 changes in the sentence. So for example, this blouse is too big for her changes into this shirt is excessively big for her. So Paraphrase Race, that's a competition. They have to paraphrase every sentence of a short story that you have just worked with, for example. But they have to paraphrase according to 2 important rules. Each paraphrase must be accurate, and in each paraphrase there must be at least there must be more than 1 change, so at least 2 changes. And well, again, that could be competition. So they can win a bar of chocolate if they finish first and they have paraphrases that were made according to the rules. Paraphrasing, using different structures, using different words, synonyms, that's an important skill for this read and then write activity. Another competitive activity that will somehow boost the vocabulary they can use to to work with the short story that they have to recall in this task, is word wars. So another competitive activity is play word wars. Word wars, a very simple activity that you can again run at the beginning or at the end of the class, and what it's all about. You take some content words from the short stories that you have been working on, that we discussed. That could be nouns, verbs, adjectives are probably the best, but you can use any content words. And what you do, you give the words, this is played in pairs. So we have, you put students in pairs and you play an antonym or a synonym war. For example, let's say antonym war. How do you play an antonym war? You have two students, you give them the first word, for example, happy. So the first student says happy, and the other student has to react with an antonym. If this is an antonym war, so they will react with, for example, sad. And so it goes. It's like bouncing the ball. It's like a tennis match. It's like a war, like shooting at each other with words. So the first students will say glad, and the other will say upset and pleased and disappointed. And this is how it goes until one of the students cannot continue. So then they lose a point and they get another word to play this antonym war. So that's a competitive activity in which you work on synonyms, on antonyms. This will be words that they will need while summarizing the story from read and then write activity. Another task in this computer-based test is the Scribe Image. You remember the Scribe Image is the short writing task for the lowest levels, level A1 and A2, and they simply write a short description of an image. They have 9 minutes to do that, and they have to write at least 25 words. This is levels A1 and A2. The traits that are scored here when the text has been submitted, it's, well, content. First of all, are all aspects of the image addressed in the text submitted? Then development, structure, and coherence of this text is also scored. Is the organization logical? Are ideas connected? Another aspect that is scored is formal requirements. Is it a description? The text that has been submitted, is it a description? Are there at least 25 words? Then spelling is obviously taken into consideration, and here they have to use correct and in a correct way and consistently a single spelling convention. So there is no one spelling convention that is required in this test, as long as one spelling convention is used consistently. So it doesn't really matter whether this is British spelling convention, let's say, or American spelling convention, as long as it is consistently used. Then grammar is also scored here. Is it correct? Is the range of grammar broad enough for the level? Vocabulary the same? Is it appropriate? Is the vocabulary range broad enough for the level? These are the traits scored. And last but not least, general linguistic range, in which the markers answer the questions if the ideas are accurately communicated and if the description is generally clear. So these are the items that are the traits that are scored when scoring the description of a picture. And based on that, the strategies, the best strategies for the Scribe Image activity would be start with the most prominent details. It's good to impose some kind of structure. The best idea is to start with the most prominent details first, and then go to less prominent details. Start with what you can see, and then what is happening. Ask yourself questions about the image so that you do not miss any important details. If they are able to ask themselves questions, keep asking questions about the image, they will probably not miss any important details later on. This is important that they use full sentences and they show a broad range of vocabulary. So it's not just points, it's not description points, it's a continuous, it's supposed to be continuous text. That's why full sentences and a range of vocabulary are necessary skills to show in this task. And obviously, after the test, after the text has been submitted, has been written, sorry, this is time to check grammar, spelling, and word count, which is actually displayed there automatically, but it's good to turn attention to this word count because this is minimum 25 words, as you remember. So, how to develop, how to work on these strategies with your students? Well, I would say that it's very important to teach your students, those who are going to take the test, to ask questions about a picture or about an image. So it's a good idea to start with your own questions first, for example. So anytime you have a good image in your course book, for example, here you have Speak Out, pre-intermediate, A2, and you can provide your students with ready-made questions from you. For example, where's the woman? What is she doing? What does she look like? What can you see behind her? What can you see in front of her? So you can give them a set of questions, and you can, together in class, you can ask them to answer these questions with individual sentences. And they can write down the sentences if you wish, but it's important that they answer the questions with individual sentences, each question. And then you can set for homework. You can add some more questions, obviously, if you wish. And then you can set for homework putting these sentences together on the keyboard. So typing the text, typing the image description. So they take these individual sentences prepared in class and they put them together. So this is their own task to think of some linguistic devices to put the sentences, to link the sentences together, how to logically arrange them. So they have the material, especially that would be a good activity for those, especially who experience problems writing things. So they have ready sentences, they take them out from the class, and then they only have to put these together in a well-structured, sensible text that describes the picture. And at the same time, they practice keyboard typing because they do it. They're doing that at home. So that's an idea for some activity in which they will look at questions, and they work with questions about a picture. There's another idea for some kind of competitive activity in which they will practice image description. You can give them a set of similar pictures. For example, roadmap. I told you 2 weeks ago that roadmap has great pictures or images, so you can easily find in roadmap some images to work with. And for example, you have this 2A unit, families. You have a set of 4 pictures that are quite similar, right? And the idea is that for homework, they choose one image and they write a description, at least 25 words. And after that, they bring the homework back, preferably in a printed out, as a printout, because preferably you want them to type the text at home. And next class, they exchange the texts. They read the peers' texts of fellow students' text, and they have to guess which of the 4 images are being described in the text. So this is some kind of competition, right? There is some purpose given to them. So it's not just homework for homework, but this is the homework. I have to type it at home because my group mates or my classmates are going to read it next time. So and this is going to be a competition. So there's this purpose for writing as well. Additional motivation, which you probably know that is a hard thing as far as teaching writing is concerned with many groups. Another short writing task for higher levels, write essay. As you remember, this is B1 and above. It looks like that in the screen, and they simply have to write a short essay in response to a prompt. They have 10 minutes for that, and they have to write at least 100 words, levels C1 and C2. Lower levels, B1 and B2, they have to write at least 75 words. So, well, not much time, 10 minutes only, and relatively short text, right? So it's important to work on some strategies that we're going to discuss in a moment. The traits that are scored here in writing essay are very similar to the image description. So it's content that is scored. So are all aspects of the topic or have all aspects of the topic been addressed? Development, structure, and coherence. So is there a logical organizational pattern? Are ideas connected, supported with details? Is there clear introduction, body and conclusion? So the structure of the text is scored. Another trait that is scored is formal requirements. Is it an essay? Or is it at least 75 or 100 words, depending on the level? These are the formal requirements that are scored. Spelling, just as I said, according to consistently within the rules of one spelling convention. It doesn't really matter which one, as long as it is consistent. And then some linguistic aspects, purely linguistic aspects, I would say grammar. So is this correct sentence structure, punctuation, capitalization, high proportion of grammatically correct complex sentences? So these are the elements tested as far as grammar is concerned. Vocabulary, is the broad vocabulary range? Is repetition avoided by using synonyms and idioms where appropriate? And last but not least, general linguistic range is, does language accurately communicate the ideas, and are the descriptions clear, emphasis, no ambiguity, subtleties in meaning, are all those elements present in the essay? So these are the scored elements. So as far as strategies are concerned for writing an essay, it's important to, well, read the prompt carefully. So focus on the topic, which is very important, because in this stressful exam situation, this is sometimes the test takers get distracted, they don't get focused, and they might write a text that will be not to the point, that is not the response to a prompt. So reading the prompt carefully is a really important strategy to remember. So they have to identify both the focus of the question and the point of view from which they are required to write. So these are the initial important elements before they even start writing. Another thing, spend some time planning. This is all. This is the thing that we keep teaching, right? So don't start writing right now. Just plan it a little bit. Brainstorm some ideas for your writing before you start really writing them down. So plan ideas. Arguments should follow a clear and logical format. And obviously, after having written the text, check it carefully. Is the correct topic, focus, grammar, spelling, all those elements? They can be proofread after the text has been written. And just a few activities to develop this kind of strategies. So I would suggest working with essay topics, just those, without even writing an essay. Just have one session with those students that you know that are getting ready for computer-based tests. Have one session where you will work on just essay topics. You can take a lot of topics from the courseware, like, for example, Gold Experience. There is Unit 3 in which there is writing an essay. There is a section on writing an essay. There are topics that you can find, and two things that you have to work with them, just without even writing the topic, writing the essay, just the topic. Like teach them to, well, this habit of underlying the keywords for the topic focus, so that they can stay focused on the topic. So they somehow underline that, or take the note of the keywords that will keep them focused on the topic. And another habit of circling the keywords to identify the point of view from which the topic should be written. Like, for example, do you agree here? So teach them to identify these two elements, keywords for the topic focus and keywords for the point of view from which they should write. And you don't have to continue, I would say, with writing an essay. Just take some topics for essays and teach them this strategy to pick those two elements, keywords for the topic focus and keywords for the point of view. You can also play a reformulation challenge, another competitive activity in which practicing a skill very useful in writing an essay. Well, somehow similar to the paraphrase race that we have discussed, but in this activity you give them a sentence. For example, I enjoyed watching the program, and you give them parameters according to which they have to reformulate the sentence. For example, you have to change the word class in the sentence. So you want to achieve sentences like I watched the program with pleasure. So enjoy, the verb changes into some synonym noun like pleasure. Then you have to change find some synonyms, like instead of I enjoyed watching the program, you can say I loved watching the program. And you can change the sentence structure. For example, instead of I enjoyed watching the program, for me the program was enjoyable to watch. So you give them the parameters according to which they have to reformulate, and that's a skill that is very useful, because this way they can use, for example, some elements from the topic when they reformulate them and put them into the essay. They don't have much time, right? So they have to use all the resources available, just 10 minutes for that. Brainstorming, this preparation phase. What I would suggest is a brainstorming game in which you can take some, if you work on a topic, for example, in your course book, like Roadmap Unit 7A is Possible Futures, you can prepare some topics in a pile of cards. You can take this from the book, for example, this roadmap, this unit in Roadmap 7A provides a list of, like I would say, topic or ideas, like robots get personalities, life expectancy rises to 150, living standards fall dramatically, possible futures. These are possible futures. So you prepare a pile of cards for a group of 2 students, for a pair of students, made of ideas taken from the unit, and they take one by one the card with the topic. For example, the student on the left takes the card robots get personalities, and what they have to do, they have to produce 2 sentences. In my opinion, because. So they express their opinion and they give reasons for their opinion based on the idea drawn from the pile, like robots get personalities. And the other students count the time. They have exactly, I would say, 10 seconds or maybe 5 seconds if you have a good group. So they have to do that within 10 seconds. If they manage, they get a point. If they don't manage to formulate an opinion and give the reason, they don't get a point within the time limit. You can easily use mobile phones for as stopwatches to count the time. So you take ideas from the book and you transform them into a nice competitive activity in which this brainstorming is practice, this element before you start. But actually writing, that is very important, that they very often forget to go through. You can also play cohesion challenge. This is another idea for a activity in which you force them to use cohesive devices in the writing. So you give them a short paragraph, timed. That would be the moment where you can practice timed writing, 10 minutes. So they write a short paragraph. You give them the topic. For example, do you agree that it is important to learn foreign languages? And then after that, you collect, for example, what they have written, and you give 1 point for any cohesive devices that they have used, and you give them the list of cohesive devices that you want them to use. It could be higher level, lower level, whichever, and then you get the winner, for example, after this kind of activity, the person who has the highest number of points, they can win a bar of chocolate, for example. I would suggest also showing your students some online artificial intelligence tools that they can easily reach, and they can get a lot of help also on their own in their individual work. So if you simply Google rate my writing, you will find a lot of websites where you can simply copy a text, copy paste a text, and you can get very nice reports discussing the content of the text. For example, here it's a report on the word choice in my text, and the comment says that your phrases definitely need some work. Please read on below, and there is some thesaurus this suggested to be used. Then there is a report on the style of the text, like your usage of transitional phrases is above average. So there are a lot of websites where you can find where you can paste piece of work and you get reports. This one is from Paraphrase, but this is not obviously not the only one. There are a lot of. Grammarly is the classic one, I would say, but if you search online, you can find even better than Grammarly. And also use the internet for some typing practice. There are great websites for typing practice where you can, literally practice typing some letters, for example. So these are interactive tasks. But there are also websites where you have great games for typing. For example, this one here in the screen is called Zombie Defender, where you have to shoot at zombies and you shoot with the letters that you actually type. You can, for example, share the website address with your group and then give them the time, and after 1 or 2 days they have to share the scores, right? So they can share the screenshots of the scores from the game, and you can get the winners this way. Give them the motivation to practice typing, because typing is very important. Typing fast and efficiently is very important for computer-based test. So what is your idea then? I'm going to, so I have shown you a few activities based on some courseware, activities that will prepare your students for the computer-based test. Well, I have selected roadmap B2, 2 pages, and just those of you who attended my webinar 2 weeks ago about speaking, can you share an idea? So any of these activities you would use and in what way? For just a quick note in the chat box, any of these activities that you would use to get your students ready for computer-based test, writing. I'm talking writing here, and right, and if you could share that with your chat box. I'm switching to the chat box right now, looking if there are any ideas how to use these. Okay. So there is gap fill here, right? Task 7 from Justyna. Right, we could, I'm trying to highlight this gap fill here for suffixes, for word building. So you can, for example, use that gap fill and this word, because this is word building at the same time, to show some rules in word building that could be good for the dictation, for example, where the rules for word building would be very useful. Yeah, okay, so Lima is talking about short stories, paraphrasing sentences. So here's, for example, this task, was it really worth it? You have like 3 nice stories that you can take. First, you can work on them. So you ask them, for example, read story 1, 30 seconds, close the books, and then then you discuss the narrative structure, the overall message in it, right? The main point in it. So all those elements that will help them later summarize, and then you can use these stories to run a competition in which they have to paraphrase every sentence there. Right, thank you, that's Santa Bondare, right? So thank you for that. Okay, so, well, as you can see, we have a lot of material available from the courseware. So we don't have any course book that says specifically computer-based test for exam preparation, but most of the material from the courseware can be easily adapted to practice also writing. Just a few takeaways before you go. So remember that writing in computer-based test is tested in combination with listening and reading. So it's especially two tasks, specifically skills combined. So it's not writing only, it's connected with some other skills. Then students, as a matter of fact, get ready for written interaction here. It's not writing on its own, it's written interaction, comprehension, and then production. So they work together with some other skills. Students will need some extra skills like typing, timed writing. So consider that when getting them ready. This computer-based test is a little bit different than the classic paper-based test one. And I would say that in computer-based test, students draw upon the experience gained in online classes, and well, especially those of you who still teach online some groups, they can only benefit from that, from this online learning for computer-based test. So thanks a lot for this session. That was really, really nice to have you all. Thank you for your ideas that you shared with me. I am just checking if there are any questions in the Q&A box, just in case. There's a question: do transitions from Ketevan, do transition words matter while grading? Yes, especially in the short writing task like the Scribe Image or write essay. They count for the structure of and overall, I would say, impression that the text makes. So definitely transition words are important and well, worth spending time on them in class. Okay, right. I'm just going through the chat box to see if there are any questions. There are a lot of remarks here, so it's not easy to identify any questions and more questions. So if I skip any, so please forgive me. There's a question about recording of the webinar. You will receive the certificate to your email box if you reply and with an email asking for the recording. I hope that you should be able to get it. It should be available also from the Pearson website soon. So, but if you get the certificate, reply to the email and ask for the recording, and then the organizers of the webinar will tell you what to do to get the recording. Okay. So thanks a lot for that. Thank you for being with me. Well, enjoy your computer-based test preparation. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.